guys, Apero here. I'm a member of Team Aretusa and now an official Gwent partner, and today I'm going to run you through my Merchants of Ophir expansion, an iteration of an Elf Swarm deck. I'm going to go through the deck, I'm going to show you an example, and then hopefully I'm going to go through a few little pointers as to how you can also play against this deck should you encounter it out in the wild. As usual, let's not talk too much about it, let's just get straight into it. Okay, let's go through this deck and I'm going to show you basically how it works. So the concept of an Elf Swarm deck is basically that you add as many elves as possible onto the board in order to proc a variety of different abilities. We have the Swordmasters who basically ping and their cooldown is reduced based on how many elves you play. We have the Vernossiel's Commandos that continue to boost themselves as long as you only and exclusively control elves. That's a new card from the Merchants of Ophir expansion. So it's important to notice that if you play a human on the board or a dryad or anything like that, that they will not proc unless Vernossiel is also already on the board. And so we basically use these cards in order to proc a variety of abilities. For example, Ailerin, who will pop out of your deck. You don't want her in your hand, you want her in your deck, so she'll pop out of your deck when you have 5 elves or more on the board. So there are a few abilities like that. Yaven is a classic one, Isengrim is a classic one. The little bit of danger that we have here, almost every unit we run here is an elf, but Amatahuri is a human, so you have to be a little bit careful about when you play her again in combination with the Vernossiel's Commandos. I like to play Invigorate in round 1 before playing any cards, and as a result I prefer having mostly or only units in my hand at the beginning of round 1. The reason for this is because we really want to win round 1 and go into a long round 3. There are some matchups where we don't necessarily want a long round 3, for example against Assimilate or against bleeding decks. Sometimes they benefit more from a long round 3 than we do, and in those cases we want kind of like a middle 3 to 5 card round 3 instead. But most of the time you will be playing a long round 3, and to do that we need to win round 1, so those extra boosts for Invigorate are really very useful. So with round 1 we're going for a very classic Elf Swarm approach, that is drop lots of elves, use Isengrim, use Yaven. Don't be afraid to commit these cards in round 1. That's the whole point, because our round 3 is built around this new card, Feign Death. It's a scenario card, or a saga card as they're being called, which allows you to drop Elven Deadeyes. And in combination with Vernossiel, that means that we can actually do a lot of damage in round 3. With Vernossiel, you want to play on the melee row if you have, I think it's 4 or more Deadeyes on the board already. If you have 3 or less Elven Deadeyes on the board already, then you play her on the ranged row just to add more units onto the board. Of course, if you are going into a long round, then, you know, it doesn't hurt to have Yaven or Isengrim. If you find them later in the game, it's okay. They'll still find a lot of value thanks to this approach. But that is the general idea. Avalok Sage guarantees that we pull Feign Death. What that means, however, is that we cannot risk bricking. So we cannot risk pulling Feign Death and Avalok Sage because we do not have any other artifacts in our deck. Avalok Sage is there purely to guarantee that we find Feign Death. Royal Decree can be used for many different things, but one of its roles can be to find Avalok Sage, to find Feign Death. Important note is also that Matahuri can pull Feign Death herself because she draws out the highest cost card into your hand. It is important that you don't play her before you play Avalok Sage, or alternatively that you play her in a different round so you have the opportunity to mulligan in that situation, because otherwise you can be stuck again with Avalok Sage and Feign Death in hand, and then you just have a 1-point card and you just cry. There's a nice little combo here, which is that if you play Feign Death, basically it will spawn an Elven Deadeye when you first drop the card. Assuming that it sticks, you play another elf and it spawns 2 Elven Deadeyes. When you play the next elf, it will spawn Waylay. Now Waylay if you need a bit of a reminder. Damages an enemy unit by 3, and when it does that, if it kills that unit, if it has death blow, so if it kills that unit, then it will spawn an Elven Deadeye in a random row. So it can be worth 6, but only if you can get the kill. And what this means is that you need to kind of do a few little setups. Now, one of the nice combos I found was that if you have played Feign Death, and then you've played an elf, and you're ready to proc Chapter 2, that is when you play Toruviel, again, either for that melee ability or for that ranged ability, in order to set up a 3-point unit. When you play Toruviel, Chapter 2 will proc on Feign Death, Waylay will be created, and you can get that instant kill and the instant emergence of another Elven Deadeye. So that's a nice little combo that you can play as well. I think those are most of the keynotes that I had written down here for you guys. Nature's Rebuke is just a bit of extra removal. Really a lot of the time you just have to decide where you want your value to come from. You know, do you want to drop the Swordmasters before the Commandos? The downside of the Commandos is they are quite easy to destroy. So there is that as a downside. The Swordmasters are also removal target. Both of them benefit from rounds. They both generate 1 point per turn. Again, assuming that you've only got elves on the board. And also keep in mind that these commandos can be interrupted by, for example, Cantarella or other spy units that Nilfgaard could play on your side of the board in order to mean that there are no longer only elves there. So there are a few things to consider there, but you really have to decide what order you want them to be played in. Do you want more removal? Are you playing against something like maybe Northern Realms that has a lot of machines where you really want to remove as many units as possible, or alternatively against another elf deck where that would be really useful? Or do you want to generate value on your side of the board, maybe against something like Death Wish, where you don't actually want to destroy their units because it procs certain abilities for them? These are the kind of decisions you have to kind of make in the moment. But aside from that, I think that's the general deck. That's what's worth considering. Also with Aileron, it's important to note she comes out when there are 5 or more allied elf units on the board, and that the saber can itself generate 2. So if you lose coin, you can actually play the saber a little bit earlier in order to get that extra 5-point boost from Aileron on your board. So that is something also worth considering. So before I finish, I want to talk about a few ways in which you can counter this deck. So if you come across this deck in the wild, so to speak, maybe you're wondering, how do I defeat it? Well, there are a few ways, and I've taken some notes here that I'll refer to. The first thing is that I would focus on eliminating individual elves. So a lot of these cards, for example, Yavin, great example, he damages an enemy unit by 1 for every other allied elf unit. So if the more elves they have, the more damage he does. So it's very good to eliminate elves on their side of the board, because there are other cards that also benefit from these elves. So I'd say just try picking off individual elves first, rather than spreading damage across multiple units. Really try to just target individuals. The other thing is, I'd say to play around Toruviel, really think about what units you place on the row and where. If you have an important unit that's kind of low in power, don't put it on the end of a row. Put it in the middle of a row. Also, don't row stack, especially if you've got low value units that are going to get a lot of damage from one damage being spread across a row. The other thing I would say is mulligan away your purifiers. This deck does not run a defender. Maybe some versions do, but this version does not. There's no bleeding, there are no locks. Really, you don't need purifiers against this deck. Keep your removal for round 3 and target those Deadeyes, those Elven Deadeyes. And I would also say hold your artifact removal until you see Feign Death. There is no reason this deck in any iteration wouldn't play Feign Death, as far as I can think of. So really, if you have any artifact removal in your deck, hold onto it until you see Feign Death. That is your target. Okay guys, that's the deck. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit the subscribe button and leave a comment to let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, and I will try to improve my videos consistently for you guys. Also, follow me on Twitch or Twitter. That's where I announce most of what I'm doing, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye!